In 1996, a researcher named Thomas Stanley published a finding that made financial planners deeply uncomfortable. After interviewing over 1,000 American millionaires, he discovered that the majority of people living in expensive homes, driving luxury cars, and wearing the markers of wealth were not wealthy. They were performing wealth. Their neighbors, the ones with the modest houses and the 10-year-old sedans, were the ones with the money. Stanley called this phenomenon the difference between looking wealthy and being wealthy. The uncomfortable conclusion buried inside his data. High income and high net worth have almost no reliable correlation. A household earning $400,000 a year can be financially weaker than one earning $80,000. The number on the paycheck measures the rate of flow. It tells you nothing about what remains. Most people, when they hear a figure like $2 million in lifetime earnings, assume accumulation is the natural result. Earn enough, keep some, end up with something. The math seems obvious. It is not obvious. It is, in fact, precisely backwards. And the mechanism that makes it backwards is not a character flaw. It is architecture. The average American household earns, across a 40-year working life, somewhere between $1.80 million and $3.20 million in gross income depending on education level and profession. The median retirement savings at age 65 sits at $87,000. Not $870,000. $87,000. $2 million entered. 87,000 remained. The question that deserves an answer is not why people failed to save. The question is where $1.90 million went, and whether anyone designed it to go there. Economists have a term, consumption smoothing, that describes a rational human behavior with catastrophically irrational long-term consequences. The theory, formalized by Franco Modigliani in his 1954 life cycle hypothesis, holds that people naturally try to maintain a consistent standard of living across their lifetime. When income rises, spending rises with it. When income falls, people resist reducing their standard of living for as long as possible. This is not weakness. It is the brain's attempt to stabilize the experience of being alive. The problem is that consumption smoothing, at scale, over decades, is a compounding trap. Every raise triggers a lifestyle adjustment. The apartment becomes a house. The house becomes a larger house. The car lease gets upgraded. The vacations become international. The restaurants become nicer. None of these decisions feel like financial errors in the moment. Each one feels like a reward earned, a life improving, a status properly expressed. Together, they construct what behavioral economists call a hedonic treadmill, a moving floor that rises exactly as fast as income rises, ensuring that the gap between earning and keeping stays permanently small. Thomas Stanley's research in The Millionaire Next Door documented this with clinical precision. High-income professionals, doctors, lawyers, executives were systematically less wealthy, as a percentage of income, than tradespeople and small business owners earning a fraction of their salary. The reason was not intelligence or discipline. The reason was social environment. Professionals lived in neighborhoods, belonged to clubs, and occupied social circles that required visible expenditure. Their income was partly consumed by the cost of displaying that income. The income was real. The wealth it was supposed to produce was not. James Grubman and Dennis Jaff, in their work on family wealth psychology, identified a parallel mechanism they called lifestyle creep acceleration, the phenomenon where each income jump creates not just new spending, but new permanent baseline expectations. The brain does not experience raise and then consciously decide to spend more. The brain recalibrates what feels normal. Within 18 months of a significant income increase, most households report feeling financially similar to how they felt before the raise. The new normal absorbed the new income completely. The raise disappeared not into savings, but into a revised definition of ordinary. Here is the turn. Here is where the question most people are asking becomes the wrong question. The common framing goes like this: people earn a lot and die broke because they spend too much. The solution, therefore, is to spend less. This framing is incomplete in a way that makes it useless. It locates the problem inside the individual, inside personal discipline, inside a moral category of restraint versus indulgence. It implies that the right character would produce the right outcome. And it is precisely this framing that the financial services industry, the credit industry, and the consumer economy have every incentive to maintain, because a problem located inside the individual requires individual solutions, individual products, individual financial advisors, individual budgeting apps. It does not require examining the system. The real mechanism is not behavioral. It is mathematical and structural, and it operates whether the individual is disciplined or not. The first structural force is inflation's asymmetry. A dollar earned in 1985 and saved in a standard savings account is worth, in purchasing power, less than 40 cents today. Nominal savings grew. Real value eroded. Most households hold the majority of their liquid savings in instruments that do not outpace inflation, savings accounts, money market funds, CDS. The money is present. Its purchasing power is leaving. The second structural force is sequence of returns risk, a mathematical reality that most people never encounter until it has already damaged them. William Benjamin, in his landmark 1994 paper in the Journal of Financial Planning, demonstrated that two retirees with identical portfolio sizes, identical spending rates, and identical average returns over 20 years could have radically different outcomes, one financially stable, one bankrupt based solely on the order in which the good and bad return years arrived. A market decline in year one of retirement, when withdrawals begin, causes permanent portfolio damage that a decline in year 15 does not. The average return is irrelevant. The sequence is everything. This is not a discipline problem. It is a mathematical problem that looks, from the outside, like a discipline problem. The third structural force is the velocity trap. Money that flows through a household without stopping does not accumulate. High earners often have high fixed costs, mortgages calibrated to their income, car payments, private school tuitions, insurance premiums, club memberships that convert income into obligation before it can become asset. The income is real, but its velocity through the household is so high that it never slows into wealth. It enters, it is committed, it exits. The person in this situation does not feel poor. They feel busy. They feel like their money is working. It is working. It is working for everyone except them. This is not a modern pathology. The architecture of high-earning, low accumulation is old. What changes is the scale. In 17th century Amsterdam, the Dutch merchant class produced the first great experiment in professional high-income earning. The VOC, the Dutch East India Company, created a class of employees and shareholders who earned, by the standards of the era, extraordinary incomes. Historians Jan de Vries and Ad van der Woude, in their 1997 economic history, The First Modern Economy, documented what happened to that income. Amsterdam became the most expensive city in the world to maintain social standing. Merchant households spent on canal house facades, on paintings, on silverware, on the visible markers of commercial success, at rates that consumed income almost as fast as the trade routes produced it. When the VOC declined in the 18th century, the merchant families who had appeared wealthy for 3 generations discovered they had less than a decade of reserves. The income had been real. The wealth had been theater. The Japanese concept of seikatsu suijun, lifestyle standard, captures the same mechanism from a different cultural direction. In post-war Japan's economic expansion, rising corporate salaries did not produce proportionate savings because the social obligation to maintain an appropriate lifestyle standard consumed the surplus. Economist Fumio Hayashi documented, in a 1986 paper challenging the conventional view of Japanese savings, that the famous Japanese savings rate was largely a function of self-employed households and older cohorts, not the salaried class whose income growth was most visible. The salaried professional was, in savings terms, performing a version of the same theater the Amsterdam merchant performed 3 centuries earlier. David Lanz, in The Wealth and Poverty of Nations, traced a pattern across industrializing economies. The first generation of high earners in any new professional class almost universally failed to convert income into multi-generational wealth. Not because they were foolish, because the social infrastructure around them, the neighborhood, the profession, the status system was calibrated to consume exactly as much as they earned. The system was not broken. The system was working. It was simply working for someone other than them. Veblen called it conspicuous consumption in 1899. What he identified was not a personality type. It was a structural feature of market economies in which social position requires expenditure as proof. The spending is not irrational given the social system. It is perfectly rational within the social system. The social system is the problem, and the social system is not going to diagnose itself. There is a final number that rarely appears in conversations about lifetime earnings. The Social Security Administration tracks it carefully. The median American who earns, over a 40-year career, somewhere between $1.50 million and $2.50 million in lifetime wages, retires with a net worth, excluding home equity, of under $100,000. The home, if owned, often must be sold to fund the final decade of life. What remains after the sale goes to medical costs, which average $315,000 per couple in retirement, according to Fidelity's 2023 analysis. The math at the end is not close. $2 million entered a life. Almost none of it remained. And the person who lived that life did not feel, for most of it, like someone who was losing. They felt like someone who was earning. The earning was real. The accumulation was not. Income is not wealth. Income is the rate at which money passes through. Wealth is what the passage leaves behind. Most people spend 40 years optimizing the rate. The passage is impressive. The residue is not. The distinction sounds simple. It is not simple. Every system around the high earner, the mortgage lender, the car dealership, the private school admissions office, the neighborhood, the professional association, the social circle is calibrated to ensure that the passage is complete, that the flow continues, that the residue stays small. The systems are not malicious. They are indifferent. They are simply designed to capture income, not to leave it behind. A man can earn $2 million and die with 80,000. The 80,000 is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of how precisely the architecture worked. The question was never whether the money was real. The money was always real. The question is who it was real for.